Hi, welcome back to Ahead of the Curve. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Teed, and today we are talking and answering a question that might sound rhetorical to some of you, but I promise it shows up in my inbox more often than you would expect. Does scoliosis make you shorter? That's a question. And spoiler alert, yes. But let's dig into the why and more importantly, what you can do about it. So let's start with a little visual. Picture a piece of string. If you put one or two curves in that string and lay it on a table, it'll be shorter than if you had the string just laid out completely flat, right? That's essentially what's happening with scoliosis. Your spine is curving and it's rotating, which reduces your height vertically. But let's go beyond that visual and get a little more scientific. So let's talk about wingspan versus height. In most people, your wingspan, that's fingertip to fingertip length when you stretch out your arms side to side, it should be roughly equal to your height. But obviously, in people with scoliosis, that ratio is off. Research shows that the average person with scoliosis has a wingspan that is about 3 centimeters longer than their measured height. And that discrepancy gets even greater with greater curve severity. So if you have a larger curve or curves, that means the difference between your wingspan and your actual height is going to be pretty significant. So why is that important? There's a study that suggests using wingspan instead of height to calculate BMI in people with scoliosis. So that's how significant that difference can be. That study was looking at adolescents and using their wingspan to calculate their height to calculate their BMI. I'll have Joe attach that study in the show notes. In my clinic, I use wingspan as a kind of what your height could be type of baseline for my in-person clients and patients. So that's kind of like it's an interesting fact to know about yourself. First of all, I think some people wonder, like, okay, how tall would I be if I didn't have scoliosis? And then also, how closely does that relate to, what your height maybe used to be? So some people who I treat are in their 60s and 70s, and they've lost 5 inches of their height over the course of the time that they've had scoliosis. So it's interesting to even relate it to that as well. So what causes your height loss to even happen? So let's go beyond the curves themselves and look at some of the key contributors to why you would be losing your height. Dehydrated fascia. So your fascia, I've talked about it quite a lot on past episodes, and not a lot of people really know what fascia is if you're not a medical provider. But your fascial sheath basically covers your entire body, and it's like a big bag that covers your muscles and your bones and basically gives you the shape that you have. And your fascia acts kind of like a sponge. When it's dry, it shrinks and it stiffens. So you know how if you have a really dry old sponge, you could probably actually break it in half. That is a great visual for your fascia. You wouldn't necessarily like break your fascia in half, but you do get something called adhesions. So those act like little cracks in your fascia, or they get like really sticky and bound down. And they prevent you from moving really well, and they also create pain. So when your fascia is dry like that, it shrinks, it stiffens, and it clings to everything. And then your discs, this is another reason why your height decreases over time. You have this asymmetrical loading of your spine. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg. Is your disc already wedged and that's what creates the scoliosis, or did the asymmetrical loading of the spine create the wedged disc? People have come to the conclusion that it was a wedge disc initially, so that asymmetry, then it perpetuates that vicious cycle of asymmetrical loading and then curve progression. And then the final reason is poor ability to self-decompress. It's amazing that, sometimes I'll see somebody for the first time and I'll have them place their hands on their hips and I'll ask them to try and increase the distance between the rib cage and the pelvis. And I get a couple of things that happen. Either I don't know how to do that or I can't do that. Those are two things that happen. And, if you don't know how to do that, that's a little bit of a body awareness, movement, proprioception type of scenario. If you can't do it, that's more of a strength scenario. We should be able to lift and lengthen your spine throughout the day so that gravity isn't winning over time. So, can you regain your height? That's a big question. Can you, that's why people ask that question to begin with, I think. I think they already know the answer that, yes, obviously scoliosis does make you shorter, but it's not, the end all be all having that awareness that, yes, it does make you shorter. Can you regain your height? And yes, you can. So let me tell you about one of my collective members who just wrapped up her first 6 months. She's in her 60s, and her husband is actually really into kinesiology. Sorry about that. And things like that. So he was curious as well when she started the program, will you actually improve your height over time through the program? So he initiated measuring her height. She's in her 60s, and when she re-measured her height at the end of the program, she gained an entire inch of height. So I'm not even kidding about that. It was amazing. But this is the way that she did it. So in the different phases of the program, we have the myofascial release to hydrate and open up the compressed areas of your spine. We have elongation techniques to train length and awareness. And then we have strength training that taught her how to self-decompress all day long. So let's talk about the fascia a little bit more. Dehydrated fascia, it looks dry, it looks clumped, it looks tense. And then hydrated fascia, it looks kind of slippery. You can actually see the even layers or the space in between the layers, and it's very supple and fluid. So this doesn't mean that you should just be drinking a bunch of water to rehydrate your fascia. You actually need myofascial release to help you rehydrate your fascia. What we do is we use a small ball to do the myofascial release. There's a lot of people who ask me, well, can I just use my foam roller? I've been using my foam roller for years, and that's just a tool that I have. Well, the problem with the foam roller is it's not getting to deep enough layers of your fascia to actually have a really great rehydration effect. when you have such a big surface area that you're using with your foam roller, you're just getting to the very top layers of the fascia. And yeah, you'll get some like temporary relief using the foam roller. But if you want to have longer lasting relief, I recommend using a smaller, firmer ball. My favorite brand are the Yoga Tune-Up balls. That whole line of balls is really great. Joel Miller created them. And while they're small and firm, they're not so firm that they're going to cause tissue damage by laying on them for a prolonged period of time, like you need to do for the myofascial release. So, if you think of a small ball on your fascia like squeezing a sponge under the water, first the fluid gets flushed out and pushed out when you're squeezing that sponge. Then, when you release the pressure, all the fluid rushes back in, and there's more than there was there before. And that's essentially how you rehydrate your fascia, you rehydrate your tissue. So the creases or the folds around your curve, I know a lot of people think that those are just fat rolls or like, yeah, like a muffin top or whatever. That's not just fat that you're seeing. It's often an external sign of an internal fascial dehydration, which is why so many collective members, they actually see a visual change in those folds over time. We take a front view, we take a side view, and I have them, lift their arm across. And usually in that side view, you can see like a big crease in their skin from the area that is collapsed or that fascia is dehydrated. And it's pretty cool to see how that decompresses and opens up over time. Let's talk about the discs and movement patterns. So the wedge discs form because they're already there maybe to begin with, or they develop over time because you're loading your spine unevenly without often realizing it. So if you skip right to strength training, which a lot of people are doing these days because strength training is touted as being super important, not only for women in their menopausal years, but also for people with scoliosis, because we tend to have a lower bone density to begin with. The problem is if we're loading without first correcting your movement patterns and getting out of that dysfunction, you're essentially just strengthening the dysfunction that you have. So you're just putting more muscle on a super curvy and compressed body if you're not learning how to decompress, learning how to get out of those faulty movement patterns to begin with. We have to create movement balance before we add the load. Otherwise, you're just pushing harder into an already imbalanced system, kind of like I was just saying. Now, the third way to help improve your height is learning how to rotate and self-decompress. Here's something a lot of people don't realize. Rotation, so that is if I'm sitting, my hips are planted and they are stationary, and then I go to look over my shoulder. That's a rotation. Also, you can do that in standing as well. That's the main movement of a golf swing, a tennis serve, forehand, backhand. Lots of sports require rotation, but rotation is a natural spinal decompressor. But so many scoliosis programs, scoliosis specific exercise programs, they overly focus on staying in this rigid neutral spine all day long. So neutral spine this, neutral spine that. And that's just not how your life works. We rotate when we walk, when we play sports, like I said. Maybe hopefully you're taking close to 10,000 steps a day. If you are walking without rotating, you're going to end up collapsing even more. What happens is more of like the side to side movement happens when we're not able to rotate sufficiently. And then having a reciprocal arm swing. So when your left leg comes forward, your right arm comes forward, and then, vice versa, each time you take a step, having that reciprocal arm swing, it helps to decompress the spine as well. Lots of people lose that over time. I have a gentleman that I've been working with for a while. He is in his, granted, he's in his 80s, so he's developed certain habits and movement patterns over time. And it is extremely difficult for him to coordinate a reciprocal arm and leg swing when he's walking. And this should be a fundamental movement that we do. And he has to think about it consciously with every step that he takes, just because of the things that he has going on in his body. So if you don't know how to rotate in general, that's not great. And then if you don't know how to rotate in a way that's mindful of your curve, then you're missing one of the most powerful tools for decompressing your spine. And that is something that I've started within the past few years, teaching all of my patients, all of my collective members, and my small group coaching online. I started to teach them how to move in every direction, but especially rotation, because it is so powerful to learn how to properly rotate. A lot of times what happens when you have scoliosis and you have more than one curve, let's say, let's talk about the most common curve type, the right thoracic, left lumbar curve. If I'm rotating to my left, which that is rotating out of my curve, okay, so that means my left ribs are coming back, my right ribs are coming forward. What often happens with somebody who has scoliosis is they'll rotate left and then they'll kind of side bend and shift to the right. So they're rotating out of the direction of their curve, but then they're gliding and shifting further into their curve in that rotation. And then when they rotate to the right in the direction of their curve, then they're still often gliding to the right, where in reality, they need to, rotate left and glide left, and rotate right and glide left. Which, if you're confused by that description, you're not alone. It is complicated. It's hard to visualize, but it makes sense when you start to understand your curve a bit better, and the fact that you're kind of like a Rubik's Cube. It's like different layers to your curve. It's not just a rotation. It's not just a side bend. It's three-dimensional. So, does scoliosis make you shorter? Yes, but you're not stuck there. You can hydrate your fascia with myofascial release. You can correct your movement patterns by just learning about your curve and what your tendencies are. That having that awareness is huge. And then you can build the strength to self-decompress. And you do that through learning how to elongate, rotate, and then you build the strength on that elongated and derotated body. And when you do these things, you might just get some of your height back. Not only that, you'll likely gain more energy, more mobility, and confidence along the way. If this episode resonated with you, check out the notes for the links to the research on height, and then also the photos of the fascia comparison of dehydrated to hydrated fascia. And then also get on the waitlist interest list for the next round of the collective so that you can learn how to do this for yourself. And if you're already a collective member, don't forget to maybe measure your wingspan and get curious about how tall you would be if you didn't have scoliosis. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, scoliosis doesn't define you. You just need the right tools to meet it head on. Until next time, stay well and stay ahead of the curve.